Well, it's been 3.5 years, but Apple has finally updated the diminutive iPad mini. It looks pretty much identical to the old one, so what's changed? Is it any good, and who's it for? Let's find out. 3.5 years without an update to the iPad mini, that was a long wait. Technology years seem to be a bit like dog years, especially when it comes to Apple's mobile chipsets. Each year they're releasing new phones with new faster chips in them. Now this latest iPad mini has got one of the fastest chips that Apple makes. It's the A12 Bionic. But what else is new for this iPad mini? Well, there's Apple Pencil support for starters. But does the Pencil make sense on a screen this small? Especially considering that you can buy the standard larger iPad, also with Pencil support, for less money. Does this iPad mini represent good value? And is it the right iPad for you? If you're a current user of the iPad mini 4, does the new mini make for a good upgrade? Well, hopefully we'll answer all of those questions during our review. Now the iPad mini hasn't changed much in its appearance over the years, and this 5th generation model looks pretty much identical to the previous generation. In fact, the size of the new iPad mini is exactly the same as the previous one, down to the millimeter, although it is 1 gram lighter. In fact, the only difference I can see on the exterior is the placement of the microphone, which has moved to the center on the rear. It's not a big change, admittedly, but it's one that will probably mean you can't use cases that have been made for the iPad mini 4 with this new mini. That is, unless you want to block the microphone. The major differences with this new iPad mini are all on the inside. It upgrades that old A8 CPU to the new A12 Bionic chip, and believe me, that is a significant performance upgrade. Also, there's 3 GB of RAM instead of 2 GB, and Apple claims that this model is up to 3 times faster than the old one. The display hasn't changed, it's still the same 7.9-inch Retina model with a 1536 by 2048 resolution. The only difference is that it now has Apple's True Tone technology. And if you're not familiar with True Tone, it's a system which dynamically adjusts the white balance of the screen according to the ambient light. Now, other changes include this front-facing camera, which gets a massive resolution boost. It's gone up from 1.2 to 7 megapixels, and that's going to be a noticeable improvement to the FaceTime video quality, and if you like taking selfies with your iPad mini. Now, speaking of video, there are no changes in the resolution of the rear camera or in the video that you can capture. It'll still do 1080p at 30 frames per second and 720p at 120 frames per second, but there's no 4K support on the iPad mini. Battery size is unchanged. I'd expect battery life to be the same as the previous model. And it's got the same Touch ID sensor in the home button. Color availability hasn't changed either. It's still silver, gold or space gray. Where the silver and gold models, they have a white bezel around the screen, whereas this space gray color gets the black bezel. Now another change is that the new mini gets Bluetooth 5 support instead of Bluetooth 4. What's the difference? Well, if you're connecting to a device that also supports Bluetooth 5, it can be up to twice as fast, and it can also work at up to 4 times the distance. A major upgrade is that this iPad mini now supports Apple Pencil. In fact, all the iPad lineup now support the Pencil. That is the 1st generation Pencil. It's only the latest Pro iPads that support the 2nd generation Pencil that has the wireless charging and the magnetic attachment. So this means that you either need to plug your Pencil into a charger with the supplied adapter, or you've got to stick it into the bottom of your iPad. Fortunately, it doesn't take too long for the Pencil to get a decent charge from the iPad's Lightning port. Now the standard iPad, which supports this Pencil, also supports the cheaper Logitech Crayon. And that's a third-party alternative to the Apple Pencil that just lacks the pressure sensitivity. But arguably it's easier for children to use. So if you want to go down the Logitech Crayon route, the standard iPad is still the only choice. It's the only choice, but it's also a cheaper choice. Now, does using the Pencil on such a small device make sense? I think so. I've not noticed any problems using mine, and just like we write on big notepads and on smaller notepads, I've found that I've just naturally adapted to the smaller size of the iPad mini. It's still essentially the same experience. Now, I like this small size. Physically, it's just under half the size of the big iPad Pro, which I have here. Now, I mentioned this 12.9 iPad Pro because that's my main work iPad, and I love this big screen. I often have two apps running side by side, and one side of the screen will be my notepad. So when I'm using the iPad Pro like that, my writing space with the pencil is about the same as this iPad mini. So again, I don't think the size is an issue at all. When it comes to device sizes, it's always a question of suitability for the task and making compromises. You see, this 12.9-inch iPad Pro is very suitable for many of the work tasks I perform. In fact, with the neat Logitech kickstand and keyboard, it becomes a versatile laptop substitute in certain situations, and I wouldn't want to be without it. But there's no getting around the fact that it is big. Now likewise, the Mini is well suited to lots of tasks. It's lightweight, it's very portable, you can hold it comfortably in one hand. But there's no getting around the fact that it is small. It's not much bigger than the largest iPhone, in fact. So for me, having both of these devices represents the best of both worlds. But if I had to pick just one, I wouldn't have either. I'd get the standard size iPad instead, since it offers some of the benefits from each of these extremes. Now when it comes to performance, is it the case that the smallest iPad is also the slowest iPad? Not anymore. This new iPad mini is the third fastest iOS device in Apple's lineup. In fact, it's only outperformed by the latest iPad Pro models. This mini, in fact, is faster than this previous generation 12.9-inch iPad Pro. What's interesting about iPad performance generally is that even the slower previous generation models are perfectly fine for the tasks that most people will use them for. I've never used an iPad and found myself thinking that it's too slow or that the experience was unsatisfactory in some way. It seems that Apple are really quite good at tuning these devices to deliver an optimum experience. It's a good time to be in the market for a new iPad. The new Pro versions are ludicrously quick. They're faster than a lot of laptops, in fact, which is really exciting for the future. But the Mini, the standard iPad and the new iPad Air all outperform the previous generation iPad Pros, and now they all support the Pencil. Now sure, the latest Pencil is a better design, but there's really nothing wrong with this first generation. The experience is very much the same. So it's really just a question of which size fits your needs best. So does the iPad mini represent good value? Well, it starts at $399 in the US or £399 in the UK, and that gets you a 64GB Wi-Fi model that I have here. The Pencil is not included, so that's another $99 or £89 if you want that. So the Mini isn't the cheapest iPad. In fact, the standard iPad starts at $329 in the US and £319 in the UK. So you can get a bigger iPad than the Mini with Pencil support for less money. But remember, at those prices, you get double the storage with the Mini and you get a much faster chipset. So I think the iPad Mini is pretty good value at its entry level. When you add LTE support or you start adding more storage, you find that bumps the price up very quickly to a level where I'd say it doesn't represent such good value. Now I think the iPad Mini is a win. If it suits your particular needs and use case, then you won't be disappointed with this 5th generation iPad Mini. I hope you found the review useful. If you'd like to see more content like this, please subscribe and help me get my channel up and running. I really appreciate all your views and comments, and I'll see you next time.